Beware.
The Dark Side of Hollywood, Part 10, The Studio Boss. I've brought you many subjects with many different paths that they took to achieve their Hollywood ambitions. But for the most part, all of our subjects' paths have taken them to the silver screen. Stardom in the bright lights of the glitz and glamour of the Hollywood lifestyle. The majority of our stories have involved frontline stars, regular players known throughout Tinseltown for their acting prowess. But tonight, we bring you a tale about a power from behind the scenes. A man who moves and shakes the Hollywood scene with a snap of his fingers. And when he snaps, oh, you better listen, for you do not want to pay the consequences that follow if you don't. Our story brings us to a place where you're bound to see a celebrity at any moment. The who's who of Hollywood, from the stars that perform in the movies to the executives and power brokers that financially make it possible, can all be found right here. If you pull up a chair, welcome to the Brown Derby, one of Hollywood's most influential eateries. Deals are made all the time concerning the future of Hollywood right in this historic restaurant, and our subject holds court in the corner booth. Meet Jack Fontaine, or Mr. Fontaine to you, studio chief of Fontaine International Pictures. You can always find him sitting at his favorite spot from Monday to Friday between the hours of 10 a.m. to 4 in the afternoon, conducting business. As you can see, we've caught him in the middle of business now. He sits at his booth smugly, with a Cuban cigar in one hand and the other stirring cream into his coffee. He's surrounded by every variety and entertainment column, magazine, and newspaper that's in circulation, keeping informed with everything that's going on around him, investigating every rumor that pertains to his affairs, business and personal, no matter how big or how small, because no one will ever get the jump on Mr. Fontaine. He's a ruthless businessman, as you can see by the way the gentleman sitting across from him is trembling ever so slightly during this meeting. Mr. Fontaine might be getting older, but he still is an imposing figure as he sits and stares at you with his dark hazel eyes, puffing on his cigar, his hair slicked back and mustache greased, draped in his black $1,000 suit, never moving, just continuing to stare with an expressionless face, taking it all in. Well, it looks like, by the reaction of the gentleman getting up and running out, and Mr. Fontaine's snarled, screaming face, that the meeting did not go according to plan. These things tend to happen, especially with Mr. Fontaine. He knows what he wants and knows talent, what sells and doesn't sell. He always has. He got his start in Hollywood working with Howard Hughes at RKO, barely graduating with his business degree. Mr. Fontaine was known as a rough, someone brought in for their physical prowess, if you will. He worked on behind-the-scene problems, contract negotiations, and things of the like, but all the while learning the tricks of the trade and how everything worked and was run, eventually putting that business degree to good use. He quickly rose through the ranks, becoming head of script approval and production. This is where he made a name for himself at being able to spot talent and scripts that would turn into successful pictures by greenlighting several successful projects such as the Western Fort Apache starring John Wayne and Henry Fonda. Also the film Rachel and the Stranger, starring Loretta Young, William Holden, and Robert Mitchum. Not long after, however, Mr. Fontaine moved on. He also had a talent to see situations and their outcomes, and he could see how the instability of Howard Hughes would bring difficult working conditions, and he was right. He moved to MGM Studios, taking over the same position, and grew his reputation exponentially. Every hit of the 1950s for the studio he greenlit for production, from all of the famous popular musicals and the popular romance and comedies to the award-winning films, he had a say in them being produced, including numerous Oscar nominations for Best Picture and 3 Oscar wins in the decade. The man simply knew talent. After a decade of success, Mr. Fontaine was becoming quite powerful, and Louis B. Mayer knew he couldn't hold on to his services much longer, and he couldn't. Mr. Fontaine turned out to be quite the shrewd businessman on the side, and thanks to several real estate deals throughout the Hollywood area and other, some might say questionable, shady business dealings, he became quite financially powerful as well. With a quick stop as the head of Paramount Studio in 1960, by 61 he had enough power and wealth to start up his own picture studio, and Fontaine International Pictures was born. No more finding success for other people and their companies. Now it was his turn to solely benefit from his ability to spot talent. He hit the ground fast and ruthlessly, acquiring all the best talent he could, by either financial means or by physical force and threats. He got who he wanted. Fontaine International produced 32 films in its inaugural year, including several hits, with the film Kiss Me Right and Hold Me Tight, written under a pen name by cursed screenwriter Ryan Rush, and starring Marlon Brando, Sophia Loren, and Howard Keel, winning the Golden Globe for Best Picture and receiving a Best Picture Oscar nomination. Mr. Fontaine hadn't lost his gift for picking screenplays he knew would be a hit, and he found one in the beginning of 1962 titled The Blonde Had Fun That Summer, and he had the perfect blonde picked out for the lead role, Marilyn Monroe. $2 million was put into the production of the film, with Marilyn agreeing to star in the picture, along with Steve McQueen, Vincent Price, Dean Martin, and Julie London. The film did not get off to a good start, with production being delayed because of Miss Monroe recuperating from an illness, then delays of infighting with cast members and the director, and rumors of Miss Monroe showing up to the set constantly late and seemingly intoxicated on several occasions. Eventually, working conditions deteriorated so badly that Miss Monroe was fired from the picture and replaced by Jane Mansfield. The picture was a success, just like Mr. Fontaine knew it would be. And sadly, Marilyn Monroe died a few months later. There's 2 things everyone knows in Hollywood circles: Mr. Fontaine's eye for success, and to never cross him in any way, no matter how small the affront might be. After the failure of the Monroe hire, he was ridiculed for taking a chance on her, with the rumors already in the air of her being difficult to work with. Mr. Fontaine felt personally insulted and betrayed by her unprofessionalism, and he let his famous temper unleash. People don't know the true story of what happened that night, but in the early hours of August 5th, Mr. Fontaine sent his chauffeur/bodyguard, Fats Dom DeNetto. The henchman snuck into Miss Monroe's home and found her asleep in her bed. Next to her was a half-drunk glass of scotch on the nightstand and 1 full bottle of sleeping pills. He then approached Miss Monroe and put his hand over her mouth, then pulled out a needle, found a freckle to conceal the jab mark, and shot her up with a hot dose. The concoction was so strong in that syringe, it would look like she swallowed multiple bottles of barbiturates. Knowing that she had a history of taking pills, he emptied the contents in the bottle of the sleeping pills, then went into the bathroom and emptied more bottles of pills, then brought all the emptied bottles and sat them on the nightstand, making it look like she overdosed. Nothing she did that night would have resulted in her death. Sadly, she made an enemy of the wrong person, and history was forever changed. The story does not end with her murder, however. Mr. Fontaine's henchman, Fat Stom, was found the next day, dead, in his car. His brakes had been cut, and he drove off the side of the Hollywood Hills. An ad for a new chauffeur was placed in the paper by that afternoon. Sadly, this was not the only time Mr. Fontaine ruined a Hollywood career and ruined a life. From the smallest employee on the lot to its most important star, if you crossed him, he would ruin you. In some way or another, he chose many methods he had at his disposal to destroy a person: murder, blackmail, character assassination that would ruin one's reputation. Even asking for a favor could lead to a person's doom, especially if it were illegal. If you indulged in certain vices, such as gambling, drugs, alcohol, sex, anything for that matter, he'd have you right where he wanted you, and that's firmly in his grasp. He would either keep supplying the star's addiction or make a difficult problem go away. But the price it would cost would be your creative soul, and if you weren't willing to pay that cost, then he would make that personal vice come to light and ruin their career. Yes, blackmail might have been his favorite tool, but he wasn't afraid to go that darker route and delve into murder. Think of your favorite movie stars that died of mysterious circumstances: drugs, accidents, early cancer perhaps, even inexplicable murder. Well, sad to report, Mr. Fontaine probably was behind it. Having the medical examiner on the payroll paid off quite well for him over the years. James Dean, Sal Mineo, Errol Flynn, Judy Garland, Robert Shaw, William Holden, and countless others all died before their time, in all different ways, from natural to accidental to mysterious to even murder. But they all had one thing in common: they all ran afoul of Mr. Fontaine. He truly was the most evil, ruthless man in Hollywood, and the smart people knew to stay clear from him. Keep it strictly professional, or try not to have any dealings with him at all. Yes, he did launch 100 careers. You probably wouldn't have heard of some of your favorite actors or seen some of your favorite movies without him. But is it worth it? What's the price you'd pay for making it big? Would you tangle with the likes of the powerful Jack Fontaine? Let's go back to the Brown Derby and check in on our subject. As you can see, he's about to have his lunch, his tomato bisque soup, accompanied with a sourdough bacon grilled cheese, his favorite specially made lunch that he orders daily. As you might have also noticed, Mr. Fontaine having some snarky words for the waitress about his order taking too much time, and belittle her in front of the dining room crowd. Then you also saw said waitress turn and run out crying. Well, you'd be mistaken, and I don't blame you. It was difficult to notice if you weren't paying close attention. You see, the waitress who delivered Mr. Fontaine's meal did not run out crying. She ran out trying to contain a muffled laughter. She added something extra to his meal, some rat poison in the Parmesan cheese that was on top of his soup, some arsenic and strychnine inside the soup, and some sweet, cool, refreshing antifreeze masked in his glass of sweet tea. Oh, there it is. Look at his face. He's beginning to taste the special ingredients now. Look at the powerful Mr. Fontaine writhe in pain. Look at the complete shock and horror plastered across his face as he realizes his reign is over. His Hollywood empire is finished, crashing down as his head hits the bowl of soup. Oh, by the way, the waitress wasn't a waitress at all. Her name is Marie Constance, and she was one of the many who had their lives and career ruined by Mr. Fontaine. She was a promising young actress, being groomed for stardom, pegged to be the next great leading lady. Then Mr. Fontaine got a hold of her with his emptied promises and false dreams. But when she became pregnant with his child, he did away with her and ruined her reputation. She couldn't even find work doing commercials after that. So she waited years of plotting her revenge, and we just witnessed her finest acting performance. She will not be caught, for she does not work there. And she is wearing a wig and glasses, which she does not need to wear. A perfect crime carried out by a woman scorned. Mr. Fontaine might have been the most evilest player in Hollywood, but being evil can't help you when you play on the dark side of Hollywood. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.